English East India Company, the English power slowly wiped out everybody and they became successful. The English people, they came as traders, merchants. They came as traders, then they became friends with the Indian people. They became friends with the Indian people, Indian rulers, and after becoming friends, they became partners with the Indian people. And after becoming partners, they slowly became the masters of India. Hi, future bureaucrats of India. Welcome to LearnStroke. India has always been a great country which has welcomed people from different religions, different culture, different civilization, and even from different continents of the world. India has always been welcoming. Different people have ruled India and given us a tinge of lot of culture, and we were evolved. India as a nation has evolved from all those things, and that is what Indians are all about. So in this regard, one group of people who probably changed India's way of thinking, India's way of life, Indians' way of life, were the European powers who came to India and established their empires in India. That is why in this session of modern India, I'm going to narrate a wonderful story of how the European powers came to India. They established their empires in India, controlled the people, and started to help us build a new world. So that is why we are going to begin with the European powers in India. So as you know, different European powers came to India. So like the Portuguese people, the English, the Dutch, the Danish, the French. So these are probably some of the European powers who came to India and had their own East India companies. So why did all these European people come? Previously in ancient India, medieval India, you know, people from Central Asia, people from Iran, Central Asia, Iraq, and even from different parts, or even from Alexander, everybody from different parts of the world came to India in search of what? India was one such wonder everybody wanted to conquer. Because if India was the symbol of prosperity, India was a symbol of wealth. This was also very important in this regard when the European powers, during the 14th, 15th, 16th century, you should see that Europe was witnessing a lot of changes. And in those times, probably the 1400s, the 1500s, probably the biggest power of Europe was Portugal and Spain. And that was a time of the European history. I'm telling you small bits of European history. Portugal and Spain were the biggest people in those times. And Europe witnessed a very important landmark event called as the Great Renaissance. Renaissance means rebirth. A new type of thinking emerged in Europe. And out of that, technology, science, and even the art of shipbuilding or ship making, or even finding different routes to other parts of the world to explore new areas were also part of many of those things. And that is a time when India was also here. And during this time, you should know that how India was trading with other people. During this time when India was here, the whole of the Red Sea, the Central Asia was completely dominated by the Islamic rules or the Islamic rulers. So that was a time when everything which had to go from India to the European places had to pass through all these areas. And that means they had to pass through the Arab dominated areas. So that was how things used to go and finally used to reach Europe. So by this time, Europeans didn't like this idea of making the Arabs or the Muslim rulers to be an intermediary between them. That is when they decided that we need to travel, we need to find a new route to India or a new route to the wealthy India for better trade prospects. That was the first point when Europeans decided that we need to find an alternate route. So this is the beginning of the European powers in India, and you know that out of the European powers, 1498 is very important because Portuguese was the first European power to actually come to India at this juncture. And after Portuguese, 1498, Vasco da Gama came to India, and after that, 1600, English East India came to India. 1602, Dutch East India Company. 1616 to 1620, the Danish East India Company. And 1664, the French East India Company. So a lot of Europeans are actually coming one by one. The Portuguese, the English, the Dutch, Danish and the French people. So a lot of people came to India. Why did they come? I think if you want an answer to why did they come, you need to know why the Portuguese people first came in. Everybody, for the simple reason, all of them simply came to get the unimaginable wealth of India. Simple, because they wanted to trade, take back the wealth to Europe by compromising the route of Arabs. That is when Portugal and Spain, the biggest powers of those time, decided that, by the negotiation between the Pope, they decided that in the Atlantic, near to the Cape Verde Islands, they decided to draw a big line. Everything to the west belongs to Spain, and everything to the east belongs to Portugal. It's an imaginary line. That was something which was created for the easiness of trade. So you might think that India has been dominated by many countries, but we have not heard any invasion of Spanish people into India. Why? Because technically the imaginary line did not allow Spain to venture into the eastern areas, especially the India and other areas. That is why Spain was more focused towards the western part of the world. And that is why Portuguese got access to India, because everything to the east was completely given to Portugal. And that is how these people came here. And by this time, everybody, many people, even the Prince Henry the Navigator, Bartholomew Dias, many people who found a new route without coming via the Muslim channels, they founded a new route to travel to India, which was called as the Cape of Good Hope. And a new series of people, without interfering with the Islamic rulers, found a new way to come to India to get the unimaginable wealth that was hidden in the treasures of India. And that is how the Portuguese people came in. Vasco da Gama came in, and first was the Portuguese power. They came to India, and that was a great scene in India. People with big dress, big hats, and colorful wardrobe, colorful dresses, they all came here. What happened is, they came to place in Calicut, which is in Kerala, which was a very normal scenario in those times. 1498 was a very long time. The people of Kerala found very unusual by the looks of the Portuguese people, and even the king. They made a good arrangements, and there were fights, continuous fights, trade, negotiations that happened on. And even the Arab merchants who were giving help to the people of Kerala did not like the interference of the Europeans. So there was struggle between even the Kerala people or the Indian people, and one side the Europeans, and on the other side the Arabs. There were complete fight between different people here. And slowly you see that Portuguese people slowly brought back a lot of wealth back to Portugal. India was slowly plundered again. And the news spread that Portugal was making a huge returns. And that is when English East India Company was again commissioned and given a license for 15 years to trade in India. They also came in 1600, established East India Company and started trading. Slowly they started the factory in Surat, got different sanctions and licenses from the Indian rulers, and they started their trade continuously. Not much. 1602, the Dutch East India Company, people from the present-day Netherlands, Holland, they also came here. Again, for trading purposes, they had a huge trading agendas to be manifested here. They came here, they started one of the factories in Masulipatanam, now in the Andhra Pradesh. And then slowly, 1616 to 1620, the Danish East India Company, they also came here. And slowly, they started their base in a place called Tranquebar in Tanjore. And after a long time, 1664, the French East India Company was also established in India. By this time, almost majority of the famous European powers were settled in India. What was happening here? You have Portugal, English, the Danish, the Dutch, and the French. And one scene, everybody used to fight with each other. That means all the European powers used to fight with each other, and obviously with the Indian people, to gain access and control of the land. And slowly, you can see that in the sessions we have to study how the Portuguese people performed, how the Dutch East India Company performed in India, how the English East India Company performed, and how the French East India Company performed, how the Danish East India Company performed. We have to understand each and every section in detail, which we will definitely do in the coming sessions. But one thing is clear, out of this whole European powers, only one European power managed to be successful among all this. And that is obviously, you know that is the English East India Company or the English people. And that is the reason why they went on till 1947. The rest of the powers were just secluded or completely wiped out from India. Even though you can see that Portuguese and Dutch powers, they existed in few areas like Goa, Cochin, etc. Rest of them were completely wiped out eventually. Out of the European powers, English was probably the one such power which emerged successful. Why is that? Because out of this whole European powers, everybody had trading interest. Probably English people had much more than a trading interest. They wanted to have a much more concept called a colonialism and imperialism attitude to create an empire in India so that they can completely exploit India and control India for the benefit of Great Britain. That really happened. Slowly, the English East India Company, the English power, slowly wiped out everybody and they became successful. The English people, they came as traders, merchants. They came as traders, then they became friends with the Indian people. They became friends with the Indian people, Indian rulers, and after becoming friends, they became partners with the Indian people. And after becoming partners, they slowly became the masters of India. I think this is, if you study this period carefully, the period of traders, friends, partners, strategic partners, masters of India. If you can study all this phase clearly, you can see the evolution of English power in Indian history. They not only wanted to make India as a colony, they wanted to subjugate India economically, politically, and wanted to create a new structure in India. And that was there were many other reasons which made English very successful. They had a much more better army, they had much more better system, and they have more funding because it was a private company. English East India Company was a private company. They had access to a lot of funds. They had a better army system, a better hierarchy, and a better vision, and a better planning. Everything was much more superior than the other European counterparts. That is why English people became so successful. This is the beautiful story of how European people came to India, and after that, how they created a stronghold in India, and out of that, how English people slowly wiped out everybody and became the main driving force of India in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and by 1947, we were able to get the freedom that we wanted. So this is a very important area to start on. This is just an introduction. There are many other things that we have to study for this also. Like for many questions that can come for the prelims. Which are the areas, which are the factories? Which are the places where English East India Company established their factories? Which are the factories which Dutch people created? Which areas can you find those factories? I mean, identify the geography belong to that. Likewise, which are the factories that Danish people had? The French East India colonies, everybody, you know one place. When you talk about French, you know that Pondicherry is a very important place. When you know about the Dutch, you know obviously Masulipatanam is very important. When you talk about Portuguese people, obviously you know that it was Goa, Cochin, and different places in India. So this was a great period when the Europeans came to India. We'll discuss more of this in the coming sessions.